Let me get my
God.
All right, so we are all ready to start. Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. Welcome. And on behalf of Atmosphere Press, my name is Viila Alawi, and I am so pleased to introduce you to today's author event. We're featuring authors of speculative fiction. So today we will hear from Randall Moore, reading from A World Without Men, released November 11th, 2022. We'll be also hearing from I.D.G Curry, reading from Shogun of the Heavens, The Fall of Immortals, which was released December 9th, 2022. And we'll be hearing from Roger Danchik, reading from Viola and the Doomsday Affair, which was released December 13th, 2022. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered from Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. At the end of this event, we will have time for your questions. So during the readings, if you think of a question, definitely feel free to type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. And also during the reading, you can use the chat for any praise and comments, and please just be sure to stay muted to keep extraneous sounds at a minimum. And one last note, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. So if you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it. Feel free to submit your works to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Randall, Stefan, and Roger this afternoon. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Randall Moore. Randall hails from Boise, Idaho, after living most of his life in Southern California. Since 2013, fiction has become the mainstay of his current existence, yet he enjoys art, books, movies, music, cooking, wine, baseball, travel, and the life of the imagination. Visit the author's website, randallmoorefiction.com. Randall's latest novel, A World Without Men, envisions a world where the incubation of men is banned. The story explores what happens when a brilliant, empathetic scientist rescues an illegal man from his sadistic owner, launching a power struggle between the status quo and the agents of change. And with that, Randall, the virtual podium is yours.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to join everybody, and thanks for showing up to this meeting and listening to me blather on from my book. I'm going to start from the middle and just the tail end of chapter 15. Tell me what you know, Director Thora Stormer said to Special Agents Shore and Raff. The key to who's behind this is the illegal person who assaulted Marcia Benton in Victoria. Find that person and we find Heinrich's accomplice. Special Agent Raff said, any idea where we might find him? Sounds like you believe Heinrich's report is true. Thora Stormer smugly shrugged with pursed lips and said, I know it's true. I've spent time in the company of men. As far as you're concerned, I never said that, but yes, it's true. So why did we stop the report from being broadcast? Shore asked. It's all rather a moot point now that the report's aired on the internet. The government's denials will continue, and they'll manufacture evidence proving that Heinrich fabricated it all. Like it or not, we don't make policy, and the policy that banned the production of men came down many generations ago. Our job is to find the illegal person and his guardian. I have an idea who we should be looking for, Special Agent Mika Raff said. And who is that? An employee of Rainbow Industries who worked on Marcia Benton's team. After completing a lucrative government contract, Rainbow was hosted at Premier Carpenter's private estate. One member of her team was promoted to supervise a team in outer space. 2 members remain in Victoria. One is on a leave of absence. Her name is Eleonora Duncan. So, you're saying that the illegal person who assaulted Marcia Benton enlisted the aid of Eleonora Duncan to flee the scene of the crime, and she takes him to Marlene Heinrich's mountain home. What puts them together? How did they become friends? Rainbow recently completed the construction of backup battery farms that feed Cycloma's power grid. The location of the final farm was in Lesbia, near Arcadian. Rainbow Industries deposited a substantial number of credits into Marlene Heinrich's account. Further, I've learned that Marlene Heinrich spent 2 weeks at the Hilton Sea Spray several months ago. And guess who was at the resort at the same time? Eleonora Duncan, Director Stormer said. Bingo. An APB was issued before the meeting was over. Shore and RAF each made personal entreaties to all the law enforcement personnel they knew in the state of Lesbia. They got into their federal police hovercraft and sped into the mountains on a hunch that Eleonora Duncan and Peter would be found there. Chapter 16. After maneuvering on the road for several hours, Eleonora noticed her hovercar's charge was getting low. The next town was Circe Springs. Ahead was a quick change station, and she pulled over and plugged in. The attendant came up and she handed her the debit chip once her car was completely charged. Let me take over for a while, Peter said. As he was dressed as a woman, no one questioned who or what he was. Eleonora agreed and they traded positions and drove off. The attendant walked back to the office. Did you get a look at the car that just drove away? The supervisor said. So they paid. What's the big deal? She replied. The police are looking for that car. The alert just came over the feed. They both ran from the office and looked down the road. The hover car was gone. Target acquired. It's headed north on Lesbia State Highway 57. They're driving a silver Lexus Hovermaster 12, Special Agent Mika Raff said into the broadcast communicator. Approach with caution. Suspects are to be taken alive. Raff looked over to Special Agent Shore and said, let's join the chase and catch these guys. With Mika at the wheel, their hovercraft lifted off and accelerated north, headed to the first sighting of Eleonora and Peter. Peter was becoming more and more comfortable behind the wheel of Eleonora's hovercar, gliding on the curves, lifting off and passing slower vehicles. You're getting good at this, she said. Thanks for teaching me. This is fun. As Peter lifted up in preparation to pass a logging truck, a line of 5 police hovercars with flashing lights passed them, going in the opposite direction. That's a lot of police for being in the middle of nowhere, he said. Eleonora looked behind and saw them slow and pull a U-turn. They were now traveling in the same direction as they were. Peter, I know. I saw them. Do you think they're looking for us? I certainly hope not. The police cars passed the 2 vehicles between them and the logging truck and then flew over the truck with their lights flashing. The lead vehicle came close to them. Then over the loudspeaker from the lead vehicle, an officer said, Eleonora Duncan, you and your passenger are wanted by the federal police. Pull over and be taken into custody. What should I do? Peter asked desperately. 2 of the following police cars were now flying forward, preparing to flank them from each side. I'm sorry, Peter. I think you should pull over. To hell with that, he declared, and then lifted into the air and pressed the accelerator to the max. The car took off like a rocket. The police cars pursued. The rear of her car was peppered by what seemed like pebbles, while a series of low-frequency concussive sounds followed nearly instantly. What's that? Peter asked. They're shooting at us, Eleonora said with panic rising in her voice. He hit the turbocharger, and the vehicle zoomed even faster forward, following the twists and turns of the road. On the other side of the road came a line of logging trucks, and after they passed, Peter zoomed over and down, driving the other side of the road. Ahead was another line of cars coming directly toward them. By now, the police were both behind them and approaching from the right lane. The vehicles headed straight for them, flashed their high beams repeatedly. 2 pulled off the shoulder, and Peter lifted off and drove right over the others, while the police car struggled to keep up. They passed a turn off to the left, and Peter put the covered car into a steep climb, heading toward the trees. The police followed, and once he was higher than the trees, he put the car into a sharp left turn and flew over the forest. Ahead was a meadow, and he put it into a steep dive and continued on with the police in hot pursuit, flying close to the ground. They were fast approaching the tree line ahead with the police car nearly on their bumper. Peter, we're going to crash, Eleonora cried out. At the last instant, he made a sharp left turn and flew sideways through the forest, flying around tree trunks left and right. The first police car failed to negotiate the first left and crashed into the forest. One of the pursuers attempted to follow, while the other 3 elected to fly over the forest and track them that way. The one who decided to pursue them through the woods followed them around tree trunks until the driver pushed it a little too hard and skidded over the bark of a tree. scraping her vehicle's bottom, forcing her to crash in the forest floor, taking her out of the chase. Ahead, Peter could see the light on the other side of the forest and burst through the last of the trees, leveled off and made a sharp right so he could follow the road away from the pursuing police cars. Special agents of the federal police, Officer Cynthia Reagan here. Suspect has led us on a high-speed chase through the forest. We've lost 2 cars. Permission to fire on fugitive vehicle requested. Negative, Officer Reagan, said Special Agent Rapp. It's of the highest importance that the fugitives be apprehended and placed into custody alive. What's your current location? Suspect is driving on State Highway 99, headed to the Cathedral Spires National Monument. We're on our way, Special Agent Raff said as they switched direction and flew over the forest, heading to the Cathedral Spires. What's that? Peter asked, pointing to the craggy peaks ahead. The map says it's a national monument. Let's go there, he said, and then angled the vehicle up and over the trees. 2 of the police cars followed while one pulled over and stopped. What's up, Riker? Officer Reagan asked through their linked communicators. My charge is nearly depleted. I have to quit the chase, Reagan. Very well. Get back safely. The 2 remaining police cars streaked after the Lexus as they approached a deep gorge. Peter put it into a deep dive and plummeted nearly 1,000 feet in elevation. At the last instant, he leveled off, turned left, and followed a river that cut through the mountains. Sorry, Reagan. My charge is nearly depleted as well. I'm going to have to join Riker, said Officer Griselda. Officer Reagan looked at her power meter. She was also nearly depleted. I'll follow them a little longer, Griselda. It looks like they've nearly outrun me as well. Special Agent Raff's voice came through Officer Reagan's audio system. Where are you, Reagan? Following the fugitive south through the Cycloma River Gorge. My charge is nearly depleted. We still have plenty of juice, Raff said. She spied the police hovercraft far ahead of her. I see you now. We'll take over the pursuit. As Reagan's police vehicle began to slow, the federal police vehicle zoomed over and continued to follow Eleanor and Peter. Take it easy, Peter. I think we lost him. He eased up on the throttle and began to rise. He glanced in the rear view and saw the fast approaching federal police vehicle. Oh, well, looks like we picked up a new pursuer. I'll try to lose them as well, he said as he angled the vehicle up and accelerated again. As they continued their climb, they were now headed to the other side of the gorge and the cathedral spires beyond. Special Agent Mishka Raff attempted to cut them off, but was thwarted by the speed of the Lexus as it crested the west side of the gorge and headed to the mountain peaks. Put the vehicle down and surrender, Raff said through the onboard speaker system. He accelerated toward the driver's side, but Peter twisted to the right and flew down to the uneven surface, twisting and turning, rising and falling with the swiftly changing topography as the federal police vehicle followed close behind. As they were fast approaching the spires, he put it into a steep climb, and with the federal police following, he hit the turbocharger and Lexus streaked toward the craggy mountain peaks. Special Agent Mika Raff kept pace as Peter flew between a pair of peaks that were like sharpened knife points. Then he twisted back to thread the needle of another pair of peaks. Raff did her best to follow, narrowly missing the mountain. This time she followed Peter straight up as he continued to climb. Once Raff reached his altitude, he put it into a steep dive, heading straight for the mountains. He flew sideways through 2 jagged peaks. She turned, leveled off, and zoomed after him. But this time her rear fender clipped the mountain, causing her vehicle to spiral down and out of control. She struggled to pull out of the tailspin, and just as she stabilized it, the car slammed into a sharp outcropping of rock and rolled down the mountainside, coming to rest in a glacial runoff, smoke belching from it. Peter angled around to survey the crash. We can't leave them here, Eleonora said. They'll die if we don't try to help them. Peter flew her Lexus to the crash site and put it down 50 feet away. They got out and ran over. The smoke was increasing, and when they came abreast of the vehicle and looked inside, they could see that the passenger window was smashed and the passenger was dead. Her forehead caved in. That left the driver. She was still alive, but was coughing up blood. Eleonora tried to open the door, but it was twisted and smashed, and she couldn't budge it. Let me try, Peter said, as he grasped hold of the door and pulled as hard as he could. It creaked and moved a little, but no further. Get me a pry bar, he said as he continued to try to wrench the door open. Eleonora ran back to her car and retrieved a pry bar from the trunk and brought it back. Peter took it and shoved it between the door and the door jamb, and with all his strength, he began to rip the door away from the jamb. Then fire began to start. Mikhailov said weakly, while coughing up blood, "Save yourself, it's going to blow." "Never," Peter cried out as he reached for his blouse torn off by the broken door. Mika could now see his rippling muscles as he groaned and wrenched the door slowly open. He reached for his seatbelt but couldn't release it. He smashed the driver's window, removed what was left of his blouse and wrapped it around a thick shard of glass and began to slice through the seatbelt. As the fire began to grow hotter and larger, he cut through the seatbelt and dragged her through the opening. Shards of glass and twisted metal slicing into his arms and chest in the process. He carried her away from the car when it suddenly exploded, knocking them to the ground. He rose with Mika in his arms and carried her back to the Lexus and put her in the back seat, where she continued to cough up blood. Peter ripped his pant legs and pressed them into her wounds. Hold the fabric in place and apply pressure to staunch your bleeding, he said insistently. Mika nodded and pressed hard while Peter got out. Eleonora was in the driver's seat and lifted off after Peter got in the passenger seat. She directed her vehicle northeast and accelerated to the maximum speed and hit the turbocharger, and the car blasted away from the crash site. Direct us to the nearest trauma center, she said to the onboard AI. Take State Highway 67 to State Highway 80, said the metallic robotic voice. That will take us into the small city of Gateway. The Colleen McIntyre Memorial Hospital is 35 miles from our current position and should take 45 minutes until arrival. Eleonora had the hospital displayed on the map and saw that the route plotted by the onboard computer drove southeast before turning north again. Realizing they were wasting precious time needed to get the special agent emergency care, she climbed over the tree line and flew straight to the city of Gateway. Return to planned route, the onboard AI insisted. Your route is too circuitous. My route is direct. Return to planned route. Return to planned route. Eleanor switched off the AI and continued forward. She flew over the mountains and forests. After 15 minutes, she could see the city of Gateway looming ahead of them. She spotted the hospital and flew toward it. And when she located the ER, she set it down near the entrance. Peter got out and lifted Mika from the back seat and carried her toward the entrance. Oh my God, exclaimed the woman in the parking lot when she saw them. It's a man. She and a host of shocked women took out their phones and began to shoot pictures and videos of a shirtless man with rippling muscles and wounds to his chest and arms carrying a gravely injured woman into the ER. When he got her inside, he put her in a gurney while a shocked nurse looked him over. He then turned and ran out of the hospital, back to Eleonora's car and got in, all the while being filmed by shocked and astonished women. Eleonora lifted off and flew back into the mountains.
Can I applaud?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Randall. I mean, I'm sure part of this comes from being, such a prolific author, which you are, but you have such a great reading voice. That was very dynamic and exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. So reading next is Stephen Curry. I.D.G. Curry is a fiction novelist who is compelled to bring what started as a dream into an entire universe of characters that interact and intertwine with the mythology he loves. He believes that fiction, folklore, and myths are the true essences of storytelling, which opens the reader's mind to what could be possible or even what the truth might actually be. Curry aims to collide the world we live in with centuries of mankind's imagination, even scattering elements from his own life into the journey. This is the journey's beginning. The Fall of Immortals is the first installment in the Shogun of the Heavens series. In this book, one fallen immortal is pursued by mercenaries, the divine, and above all, those he once held dear from his past life. The clashes between these factions will decide who becomes an ally or who's next. And with that, Stephen, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm I.D.G. Curry, and this is Fall of Immortals, Shogun of the Heavens. This is the first installment. What I will be reading from today is chapter 14, which I must say has become my favorite chapter out of all of them. And because it jumps right in. The sample is also available on the website for those who want to see how it begins and gets there. But here we go. Clouds with ill purpose rolled over the strata from the northwest, bringing with them thunder, ice, and darkness. Bearing the pain of hunger and now the frigid winds, resentment, loyalty, and fear were all that warmed the soldiers of Selma. Two hawks clutching two separate forms of the same message flew against the cold gusts, straining their wings towards the brightly lit blockade outside of Bastion, the market city. Commander Zaldin and his ranked legionnaires were sitting in the war tent. The infantry was ordered to hold their position until the commander mobilized the assault. Melian sat beside Odysseus as his lieutenant. She was the third champion of the infantry tournament. The tournament opened up many opportunities for worthy warriors to change their circumstances and leave their previous lives behind. As a Shylock, Melian had been exiled by her coven and banished from their lands. She, like many others, kept the scars of their past hidden well and did not discuss that matter much, if at all. Unlike other vampire species, the Shylock all shared a very similar appearance, which made them difficult to distinguish from afar. Their skin was as pale as an albino's and cursed to bear the sun's scorn. The slayer of their eyes was blood red, and their irises were typically either blue or green. The style in which they keep their hair will differ. However, most Shylock you will find have one shade of blonde or another. They possess superhuman speed and strength, combined with the instincts of an apex predator. Taking into consideration the other traits of her species, such as regenerative healing, heightened hearing, and nocturnal vision, it is obvious how Melian became a champion of the Southern infantry. Melian herself could be described as the manifestation of a beautiful death. She wielded a silver-edged sword, well-balanced and particularly deadly to her species. Its guard was crafted as a horned demon's face with blood rubies in its eye sockets. She was athletically fit, yet delicate, alluring and lethal at the same time. She kept her crimson red hair braided in a ponytail and would brush against the middle of her back as she carved through enemies. Hawks cried out, screeching while encircling the center of the camp and surveying for a landing post. Shortly after, and each with a bird on their right arm, two soldiers entered the tent, presenting the winged carriers to the senior staff. Xanatos collected the messages, and two hawk bearers departed the tent. Commander, Generals Hector and Leonidas have reported victory and are awaiting administrative relief to maintain the kingdom's compliance, he read aloud. Elated, Zaldin thumped the table with his fist. Excellent. Their reports could not have come at a better time. This means that we will take the city tonight, the war marshal declared. Tonight? Odysseus laughed, asking the question. I do not doubt that we can claim victory, though aren't those expectations ambitious for this endeavor? After all, we are outnumbered 5-1 and outside their walls, and they will be on alert, Odysseus added. We should simply kick the door down the main gate, catch them by surprise, and unleash the legion upon them, Magnus proposed. Melian listened intently to what was being said. The way Zaldin and his league were speaking, it was as if the feat was no great contest. She listened as the legionnaires went around the table debating how they should win instead of whether or not victory was even possible. Such a display would bring unwanted attention our way. Forces that we are not yet ready to confront will see it as a challenge of a different kind, and we have not reached that particular phase of my plan, Zaldin replied. So you are looking to do this quickly then? Why not send in a small force to accomplish what many cannot? Odysseus asked. The gate will be well guarded day and night, anticipating an attack. We have watched a patrol since we arrived. 8 men guard the gate, 4 above and 4 below, Zara added. You are correct, Zara, yet we are going to walk right through the main gate anyway, said Zaldin as he tapped his finger repeatedly on the table. How do you see that happening? Asked Odysseus. There are 2 temptations that have led many men to ruin, greed and lust. When presented with an easy opportunity to get either, a man's wit dulls, blinding him to the evil intentions hidden around him, said Zaldin. Odysseus, you will lead the mission over the wall. Zara is familiar with the city and will accompany you, guiding you and Melian to locate and eliminate the enemy war chief. Once you have addressed the guards at the gate, open it so that the main force may follow through. Zara's wail will be the signal for the legion to attack, he explained. I see what you're thinking now. The storm will provide the perfect cover of noise and shadow. allowing us to be stealthy and discreet. That's why it must be now. Very well, we will gear up and head out immediately, Odysseus agreed. Magnus, prepare the men to mobilize on the signal. Dismissed, Solon concluded, as the senior staff all rose from the table and left the tent to prepare for their roles. The Gallic standing watch at the main gate peered into the cold and windy abyss, barely able to see 30 feet in front of them. They clenched their axes and swords in one hand and held their fur cloak around them with the other. Thunder battered the clouds, snowflakes scratched their faces, and the wind whipped them with frost. The torches they carried flickered violently, fighting to keep the light alive in the cold darkness. Pacing back and forth to keep the blood flowing in his limbs, one of the guards saw a strangely shaped silhouette approaching from within the stormy void. Who's there? Declare yourself, the Gallic guard shouted over the wind and thunder. The strangers stumbled in the snow, staggered by a gale before rising back to their feet, and continued limping towards the gate. Lifting the torch towards the unknown traveler, the guard said, "Hold! Come no further. Identify yourself, or by the All-Father, be buried in the snow." The four bowmen above the wall drew their bowstrings, preparing to fire, and were unfocused on the figure stalking the darkness to their left flank. Odysseus had snuck past the encounter, using the thunderclouds to conceal the metallic knocking of weapons and armor, which clanged in a sack that was carried over his shoulder. The stranger took 2 more steps before the Gallic bowmen fired 2 warning shots at their feet. "This is your final warning," declared the guard. To the raiders' surprise, 4 hands were raised above the stranger's head instead of 2, a sight that would soon be dwarfed once they saw the beauties that were concealed underneath the shroud. A smile crept on the guards' faces as they turned to each other with menacing grins. The 3 Gallics behind the first to address the strangers signaled those on the wall to stand down. It would typically be foolish for a beautiful woman to travel alone, yet finding 2, the 4 men below approached the lost 2 damsels to investigate. "I see Freya has lost flowers from her garden. What are your names?" one of the tribesmen asked. He circled the young women while carrying his sword over his shoulder, and his carnal imagination churned. Zara and Milian disguised themselves as handmaidens escaping from their master. "Please, we are in need of your aid. My sister and I have escaped a terrible man who continues to pursue us," Milian pleaded. The handmaidens' clothing was suited for traveling beyond the home, though their uniforms typically insinuated their hips, breasts, waist, and thighs. Hypnotized by their lustful desires, the guards did not consider how 2 young women had survived on foot in the storm alone. "When we heard that people were fleeing to Bastia, we had hoped it would be possible to join your tribe," Milian begged. "You want to join us, do you? How do we know you're not a spy? I think we need to conduct a thorough search, just to be sure," replied the sword raider. He then drew his dagger and grabbed Milian's crimson hair as he slid the cold metal against her pale skin. Zara held Milian's hand so that they wouldn't be separated. Seeing the gesture filled their prospective captors with confidence and enthusiasm as they chuckled in a circle. "We are not spies. I beg you have mercy on us. We mean you no harm," Milian pleaded. "Well, is that so? Don't think I've seen anything like you 2 before. One with red eyes and red hair. The other appears to be from the Darklands, except they don't have eyes that burn like Baldur's light," the raider responded, releasing Milian from his grip. "Well, if you're not in a clan, then you are not permitted inside. However, there is something of an induction ceremony we can have right out here. Once the ceremony has been completed, you and your friend will belong to our clan," he continued, planting the tip of his sword on the ground. He and his companions began maliciously grinning. "And what ceremony is that?" Zara asked combatively. "This one has spirit. I want her first of all. She will give me children with eyes like the sun," said another guard. His axe twirled in his hand as he drooled over Zara's long legs. The man I identified as Ubba responded, Now, that is not how it goes. The most accomplished warrior will ride first. Everyone else follows behind him. And tonight, in front of this gate, that would be me. He grabbed Milian from behind by her breast as she pushed against his chest, pretending to struggle. The other two raiders grabbed Zara's arms, striking her from behind to put her on her knees. Then I will follow after you, and anyone here who disagrees, prepare himself for Valhalla's call right now. None dared to argue as Uther walked towards Milian to hold her as Ubba unfastens his trousers. No, help! Milian and Zara cried out. The pleasantries were being replaced by savagery as the raiders groped and squeezed their flesh. Milian performed like a natural predator, not breaking character as her prey dropped to their guards. Zara began having difficulty restraining her reactions as the guards made more aggressive and invasive attempts. The four bowmen looked on in entertainment. For thousands of years and with the rise and fall of many civilizations, mankind has always felt fascination and excitement observing the carnal fulfillment of others. This flaw, however, became the exact reason Odysseus now crouched on top of the wall with his bow drawn unnoticed. Waiting for the next thunderclap, Odysseus lined up his aim. The cries for help his symbol commenced. When thunder shook the air once more, Odysseus fired his arrow of light, hitting all four raiders on the wall and pinned them together side by side through the ears. With the four raiders who could raise the alarm dealt with, Zara and Milian found themselves unencumbered. Ubba had just finished dropping his breeches in front of Milian, preparing himself to soil her womb with his essence. As he felt upon her thighs, before he could enter his goal, Milian said, "Thank you for getting dinner ready." Ubba paused. "Dinner?" he uttered, confused. "Blood always tastes better when it's hot and pumping," she replied. Suddenly, Milian's elbow struck Uther in the pelvis, causing him to drop and cry out in pain. Caught with his pants down and in an erection, Ubba found Milian on top of him, though not how he would have liked. The seductive Shylock pounced on Ubba, sinking her fangs into his throat, and pinned him down as she fed. Words could not escape his lips as his neck was sucked dry. The raiders holding Zara began to struggle as she overpowered them both, breaking their legs with swift kicks to the knee. She immediately then broke one of their necks with a backhanded fist, and the other she decided required punishment beyond death. This one's hand was particularly active between her legs as they tried to hold her down. Zara spared her hand through his voice box to prevent him from screaming. She then began to rip him apart with the same savagery which he had intended for her. Uther crawled away on the ground in pain and fear as he watched his clansmen get brutalized before his very eyes. In a panic, he attempted to flee while Odysseus took aim from on top of the wall. As he was about to release his arrow, he paused when Milian dashed around and in front of the regretful raider. "Wait, that one belongs to me," said Zara, halting Milian as she was about to relish another drink. Like the other soldiers, Milian was not permitted to feed during battle. However, the chance to taste the enemy before the rest of the legion was far too tempting to pass up. "You already killed your two. I will drink this one while his blood is still soaked in fear," Milian responded as she bent Uther's head and prepared to bite into his throat. "Are you disobeying me, Lieutenant? Because if you are, I can quickly show you that even though you are one of Selva's champions, there is yet a stratum above you," Zara snapped sternly. Milian reluctantly retracted her canines and held Uther off from her, then handed him to Zara. "Apologies. I did not intend any disrespect. Sometimes my nature is too arousing to deny," Milian said submissively. Her cravings gnawed at her, and blood ran down from her lip as she bit it, restraining herself in anger. Zara walked up to Uther, gave him a knee to the stomach, and then held his head to the side as her jaws filled with a garden of teeth. Zara feasted on his life force, nourishing herself on his being until his cloaked husk hit the cold ground. Milian was shocked. She had never witnessed another species feed off the life of another in such a way. She stared at Zara with confusion as her face returned to her bronze beauty. So, you are famished yourself. You are not a Shylock. What are you? Inquired Melian respectively. Still hungry. We should join the general on top of the wall. We're just getting started, Zara replied. Zara and Melian leaped up the wall in a weave pattern to the top and found Odysseus surveying the city. Having fun so far, ladies? Odysseus asked amusingly. Zara and Melian gathered and then equipped their belongings from the sack. Very funny. Maybe next time we can switch and I can play the archer, replied Zara as Odysseus responded with a brief chuckle. I have been trying to guess where in the city their war chief might reside. It would most likely be illustrious, yet defendable if necessary, and not near the fleeing survivors from the other clans we've defeated. Odysseus said as he pondered, I am still not sure where he is exactly, but I have found out where he is not and where patrols have been posted at Zara. How did you learn that? Asked Melian. From the snack earlier, Zara answered with a grin. Zaldin once said you were full of surprises. Also, that you are familiar with the city. What path do you recommend we take? Asked Odysseus. The warden's tower brushed against the dark clouds, ominously lit with candles on each level. Pointing towards it, Zara said, Uptown Bastion was where the wealthiest in the city lived. He is either there or in this watchtower. Highly likely it is the watchtower. It once belonged to those that maintain law in the city. General Odysseus then added, the tower can also serve as a vault for their spoils. Your brother's mad scheme may just be possible. Guide us past the lighted patrols. We can then eliminate them discreetly. You both can have your fill and learn more information on the way. Nodding in agreement, the infiltration team followed Zara along the roofs and through back alleys until they arrived at the tower, stealthily slaying and devouring the Gallic patrols as they passed.
All right, Stefan, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to make sure we have enough time for a third reader. So, yeah,
I was into it.
Definitely. I mean, that's a reason for everyone to pick up this book and find out what happens next at the next watchtower. So, yeah, well, thank you so much. And I think the combination of the supernatural and the mythical, I mean, it's already coming to life. So definitely a fascinating element of this book that I recommend everyone here checks out. And for our final reader today, we have Roger Danchik. Roger has been a science fiction nut since he read his first sci-fi book, Starship Troopers. He has written plays both for children and for adults, a musical based on the play The Scarecrow, and a movie or two. He believes in writing with laugh out loud humor, odd characters, weird situations, and of course, delighting his readers. Viola and the Doomsday Affair is Roger's latest creative work. It's a rollicking quest to save the universe by a very unusual group, a rabbi and his clueless son, a beautiful vampire, a sex-obsessed Teraphim, Barnabas the demon, Queen Pharaoh the original cat, and Jasper the belly crawler. To save the universe, they must pass 3 impossible tasks. It's always 3: death, destruction, and dismal doom. So I'll let the rest of the story come alive with Roger's reading.
Hello, everybody. This is the cover, which is, I think, maybe even better than the book. Those guys did great. So this is a reading from Viola and the Doomsday Affair. I've always liked this moment in the book. It takes place in a mystical bar owned by Lilith from Old Testament stories. It is where the rabbi, the hero of the book, and Viola, a sort of vampire who seeks her own death, swear to each other to undertake the impossible quest, each for different reasons, of course. They swear by the Hebrew genital oath, which comes from the Old Testament, Genesis 24 or so. And even today, nobody actually knows how it was done. So I filled in. The 3 Sams are the angels Sinoi, Samsonoi, and Samangal, who were sent after Lilith when she fled. Their job was to kill the 1,000 children a day Lilith would bear. As the infinity went on, they ended up drinking in her bar to keep an eye on her. As I say in the novel, an eternity is a pretty long time and it changes people. Jasper, who works in the bar, is crawling around and simultaneously cleaning the floors. It is the only job he can do since he cannot walk or stand. He has been in love with Viola forever, who won't have anything to do with him until he can stand next to her. The rabbi's beard is more or less a character of this book. It is known as a battle beard and has its own intelligence, way of seeing the world, and the ability to move. It is the precursor to all the beards that religious Jews wear today. Most of the chapters of this book start with a quote from the Book of Truths, written almost an infinity ago by Rabbi Kef. The entire book has not been found, just pieces here and there, which I use as chapter headings. The one for this reading is the tavern song he wrote down about a mustached old woman. It would be unfair if I didn't mention that I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the book Legends of the Jews by Louis Ginsberg, published in English between 1909 and 1938 by the Jewish Publication Society of America. Now, first of endless verses of a tavern song. Her ass was so sweet, it was a virtual prayer. Her mustache so long, it entwined in her hair. She had only one breast, but it tasted the best. So lay with the mustached old woman. Now to the story. Viola raised her eyes to meet his. Rabbi Benjamin gravely stood and offered her the only clean corner of his loggy handkerchief. Viola shrugged and grasped it, even though touching him only by his handkerchief seemed somewhat silly now. We will finish the business of my sect and find you true happiness. Upon my order, upon my word, and upon the ineffable name of my Lord, he that was, that is, and that will ever be, and he that was with us in their bondage, and he that shall be with them in their bondage of time to come. I so now swear. He said a word, and though his voice was soft, the word sighed throughout the universe. All heard clearly, but none could remember the word. Rabbi Benjamin has sealed his oath by pronouncing the ineffable name of God that none can know. It is mankind's most dangerous action. Swearing falsely has the most terrible consequences, for it endangers all. For when God created the universe, he laid over the abyss a shard of sapphire on which is engraved the ineffable name. The shard prevents the darkness of the abyss from bursting forth and devouring the universe. When one swears falsely in God's names, the letter of his name fly away, and there is nothing to restrain the darkness of the abyss. God is particularly severe with falsehood because treachery is the one quality that he did not create, but is something that men themselves produced. If Rabbi Benjamin broke his oath, the darkness would come. Viola stood and faced the rabbi. He had sworn, now must she. She knew he expected her to keep hold of the handkerchief and pledge, but an older, holy memory came to her. Viola kept her eyes fixed on the rabbis and said those most horrifying of words to a rabbi sworn to never touch any woman but his wife. Drop your pants and sit. Oh, great, like I really want to hear this, muttered Jasper. Viola kicked him in the stomach. Watch the balls, they'll be our children, he muttered in pain. Rabbi Benjamin's beard stood up straight, as if trying to protect his modesty. He knew what she asked and could not refuse. She had demanded to be sworn by the genital oath, the oldest and most holy covenant in the Bible. It was how Eliezer swore to Abraham, how Joseph swore to Jacob. In the Bible, it is translated as putting his hand under his thigh. In actual use, he who swore would grasp the testicles of the person to whom he swore. Viola was insisting she wrap her hand around his family jewels while she swore. His face turned as white as God's first light. His beard poked out in all directions like a frenzied porcupine. If so touched by a woman, he would be unclean for, well, no one really knew, but it had to be a long time. Could he even become clean again? Could a woman demand this oath? Was it legal? Would his penis shrink into nothing under the gaze of the bar? Would his balls fall off with an audible clunk? Then he laughed at himself for cowardly procrastinating and put his trust in God. It is, he thought, just one of the ghastly tasks I must undertake. Fortified that the worst was still ahead of him, he tried to calm his beard and began to strip off his rabbinical coverings. Keeping his face blank, though unable to control his furious beard, he slowly removed the long black coat that modestly covered most of his body, revealing a stained white silk shirt and a long black pants held up by black and gray striped suspenders. Each gray stripe symbolized one minor act against God's laws, each black stripe one major offense. Thinking briefly of his wife on their wedding night, he shrugged the suspenders from his shoulders. They fell hanging to his knees. He loosened the gartel, the woven black belt that separates the pure heart of a man from the animal desires of his lower half. Wincing, he opened the belt and his baggy black pants fell to the floor. He quickly sat down as the bar erupted in wolf whistles. Viola, eyes blazing, slowly turned her head in the direction of the bar, and the noise instantly cut off. It was followed by the sound of drinking as the patrons fiercely returned to their drinks. Sitting fully erect, the rabbi's animal half somewhat hidden by the tablecloth, he bounced on the chair coquettishly while he slipped the first pair of his knee-length black silk boxers from his waist. Now visibly gritting his teeth and bouncing higher, he slipped down the second pair and then quickly the other 5, each one shorter than the other. Finally, he removed a black jockstrap-like undergarment, a rabbinical thong, shaped to look somewhat like a leaf. It was the final covering of his flesh and represented Adam's loss of innocence in paradise. Taking it off in the presence of any but his wife could lead to endless unknown disasters. He sat in the bar naked from his waist to his knees, trying very hard to appear dignified. Everyone in the bar now was silent and grave, knowing both the seriousness and cost of his gesture. The 3 Sams took quick appraising looks. Not having genitals, they were always fascinated. Lilith finally had to ban them from the men's room. Wow! Look at the size of that circumcised punkus. No wonder you like him, Viola, shouted Jasper from under the table. Viola kicked violently at the voice, and Jasper snaked out to his corner, screaming Yiddish epithets. Rabbi Benjamin, for the briefest moments, plotted revenge, and in response, his suspenders darkened. Viola walked slowly to the half-naked rabbi and knelt by his side. Slowly, with sweet gentleness, she pushed her hand under his thigh and grasped his testicles. The rabbi involuntarily jumped and then controlled himself. Not a twitch, he swore silently. Not one twitch. Holding him firmly, she said the words, "With you, for God, with all, against all, until an end. I want an end." She gave a squeeze and felt him tremble in response. In the cave of the Master of Death, the soul gong boomed for the first time this infinity. The angels stopped singing. The sun looked hopeful. The wind took a huge breath and sighed throughout the forest. Sitting as still as possible with Viola's sweet iron grip on his sweating testicles and absolutely non-twitching penis, Rabbi Benjamin fully understood the power of the ancient genital oath. He had always wondered whether the term was an aberration or a mistranslation, but naked and in her grip, he had made himself as vulnerable as a man could be, Though she was swearing the oath to him, he was the one held powerless. When someone has you by the balls, they do not have to promise you anything. He realized the wisdom of the ancients and why they had considered it so reliable. It was an oath that could only be given by someone absolutely trustworthy. Viola released him, slid out her hand. Her hand was covered with the rabbi's sweat, and she unconsciously wiped it on her clothes. Viola's experience with love and sex is legendary, but this clasp of her hand to his most vulnerable parts produced a sensation that she hadn't felt in centuries. It was stronger than sex, more moving than love, and more powerful than rage. It was the slimmest possibility of better possibilities. In the old days, it was called hope. Can it, she started. Then, does it end, she asked. No, said Rabbi Benjamin. Suddenly powerful, he leaped to his feet, snatching up his 7 layers of underwear, thong, and pants. He swirled his handkerchief over his head like a demented football fan. Yahweh, we go, he screamed to the ceiling. The entire bar turned to stare. It begins, he exulted. The end finally begins. Holding his lower garments up with one hand, he grabbed the startled Lilith from her chair and danced her madly back and forth in her bar. L'chaim, Rabbi Benjamin shouted, finally letting the dizzy Lilith go. A cheer erupted from the patrons of the bar. They weren't quite sure what was happening, but there would probably be free drinks. Even Jasper in his corner looked interesting. A presence filled the room, mysterious, ineffable, but unmistakable. Damn, muttered Lilith. The presence of God in a bar was always bad for business. The rabbi grabbed a bottle of Lilith's strongest liquor, sat and poured the entire container on his now unclean, still naked loins. To life, he roared as the harsh liquor burned his sensitive skin, cleaning the unclean. To life! Viola smiled at his hopefulness. He seemed so young. Under her breath, she muttered her own plea. Let me die, she begged to the presence, and like any human, wondered if she was heard. Thank you.
I just want to mention to the audience that I think this was one of your friends, Roger, that sort of described this book as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but with more foreskins.
Yeah.
And I think that was a tribute to that.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Roger. We now have some time for our audience Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you have a question for any of our
I'm
authors
unmuting,
or
Yasha.
for...
Unmuting.
Oh, okay. If you have a question for any of the authors or for multiple authors, feel free to put that in the chat and I will make sure that gets asked. So that includes any of you authors. If you have a question for one another, definitely feel free to put those in the chat as well. As if anyone's thinking or percolating on questions, I actually had a question that I wanted to start with for all 3 of you. Because all of your stories have speculative elements, whether you classify that as fantasy or sci-fi or somewhere in between. I'd really love to hear from each of you where the ideas for each of these books started. What was the initial inspiration? Maybe Randall, if you wanted to kick us off on that.
Okay, well, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about a lot of the language that we've had, been hearing over the years, and a lot of the stuff like, you know, Me Too, toxic masculinity, Time's Up, you know, incel, all sorts of language that seems to be really preferring a world without men. And so I'm just thinking, well, why don't we just go ahead and get rid of them altogether and find out where that leads? So that's kind of where I started up with that idea. And of course, I figured, well, we can't really get rid of the old buggers entirely. We need them around for something or other. And so I just thought about, and I guess it's mostly, for me, it's almost like automatic writing in a lot of ways. When I was asked a lot of questions during some of the interviews to come up with why I did stuff, I realized I had to kind of analyze what I'd written. In a lot of what I've written, I'm talking about the basic of humanity. And what is humanity? Humanity consists of the masculine and the feminine. And without one, you cannot have humanity. Humanity won't exist without the male and the female. And that's not even, that's not only limited to the physical uniting of the sexes. It's roles that are played. And I think in the segment that I read to the group, it did have a lot of those ideas, to where, as Mika Rath would have died if it was just Eleonora trying to rescue her, because she didn't have the strength or the will to go after it. However, they got into the fix because Peter was aggressive and rebellious, and so he, went off on that crazy flight to escape the police, and yet when it came time, after he had defeated the police, he might have just flown off on his own, but it was Eleonora and his respect for her, and that she told him, we can't let these people die. And so it's because of the feminine that got the masculine to go and do what he had to do to save the life of the federal police agent. So in that respect, that kind of encapsulates a lot of what the story is about, and a lot of the concepts that I wanted to address.
Sure, yeah. So that sort of response to things happening in the real world, as we're seeing it live, sort of. I think that's definitely kind of feeds a lot into various types of speculative books. And Stefan, I'd love to hear from you about that as well, because obviously a lot of the inspirations from your book are coming from way back in history, not necessarily right now. So could you tell us a little bit about your inspirations as well?
Oh, well, I'd say that what inspired me first to go into Greek mythology was, admittedly, Disney's Hercules. Probably my favorite Disney cartoon from my kid. I still watch it with my son from time to time, and that introduced me to mythology. And as I looked at it more, I started reading more books, watching documentaries on the History Channel. I always liked their storytelling, and I modeled my storytelling similar to how they told stories of old, like the content of it, the way that they formed around a journey, a goal. Like there was always a test, a challenge that a hero had to overcome in order to elevate. Another, as far as the description, I read a book. I think it was Glenn Cook's The Dread Empire, and I fell in love with his style of writing because it's very poetic and descriptive. And as I read, I could visualize and see and watch what was going on. So as I was writing mine, I like to be able to hit at least 4 out of the 5 senses of when I'm writing, when I'm painting the scene. I want you to see what I see, hear what I hear. If I could put the taste in your mouth, I will. And the other part of the inspiration was from a dream that I had when I was in a very dark place. I was coming out of a very bad long-term relationship, and my grandmother had passed, and I wasn't able to attend the funeral because I was in the middle of a migration process. So I was not able to come back home, and I used the adversities really to keep me to push forward. Like my adversities push my work ethic. And as far as Zara and Zaldin and Xanatos, all the incarnations, they have connections, but when you look into it, they're siblings and they're independent, but they also are like-minded. each of them were created with a purpose, but they had to discover and learn that purpose as they each develop and move forward and progress. And actually, this is a picture of Zara here on the shirt that if you want to see it, there's more on the website of more of the characters. I'm still adding some of the characters, trying to get at least one or two up a month. So everybody feel free to browse. And like I said, the sample is available on the website as well, shogunoftheheavens.com.
Yeah, definitely. I love to see the merchandise with the characters on it. Roger, any ideas from you about what sort of inspired this book or this story, or even just elements of it?
Well, I was always troubled by the stories in the Bible because it didn't seem like they quite got together. And then I discovered that the Bible, as written, is a highly edited document. But the stories behind it there are zillions of them, and much more interesting, much more sex and violence and weird stuff and animals. And so I started researching that, and then I knew I had to write something that brought all this out. And from there, everything came out, and you just let your imagination fly. I'm sure the other authors know this feeling, and see what comes out. And that's how I wrote the book. That was my big plan. I knew the ending.
And the rest is just filler.
Yeah.
Well, kind of a similar-ish question in the chat from Cam. This is another one for all three of you. I'm curious how writing your speculative novels and immersing yourself in the themes of your book changed or challenged the way you walk through your reality to this day. So thinking about after the writing rather than before. Did your writing bring any epiphanies about or open up any more questions for you?
Well, absolutely. And you can't write a novel and remain unchanged. I mean, you pour yourself into it, and then at the end, you're a different person. And unfortunately, I can't write another novel about that same thing. So you have to move on.
Yeah. So kind of just the process of doing it, no matter what the story is about, has that effect. Maybe Randall, do you have any ideas about in this vein of thinking?
Well, in the whole process of writing, I will think about certain kinds of issues and problems in a historical fashion, and also contemporary, how it applies to contemporary life, and can give me insights that may inform me about my interpretation of events, and that fuel things going forward. However, then I'm on to whatever the next thing is, and then I have a whole set of new issues and problems to deal with at that point. So a lot of writing to me, it's like problem solving. It's I have a problem, and sort of like I went back when I first started writing again in 2013. There were two novels I wanted to write, and I started them both. One of them I had a better start than the other. There was a science fiction one that was much more difficult, and I just had to put it down. What I ended up doing was I wrote a novel based on a dream that I'd had, like, God, it must have been 20 years prior. And the dream was, it was like a fully formed world, and I had a character in it. And it ended up being an urban paranormal. It was really, I didn't even know what that category was. I just wrote a story. It was like basically I was out in Hollywood with my girlfriend, and we got kind of suckered in by a group of people into some kind of party in an abandoned building. And it turns out they were vampires. They left me for dead and kidnapped her. And when I came to, I realized that I have to find her, but and then I learned that I'm turning into a vampire and I have to find her before I change. And so that was what that story was about. And it became my first novel, Falco, the Dark Angel. And I ended up writing 6 in that series. There's a 7th I have to edit and all pursue it further. But it was sort of like during that thing, I solved a lot of problems, and everything I've written is all about problem solving. How do you write this story? And so I didn't even understand what research was prior to that, but I did a lot of research in the process of doing that. And I didn't return and finish my science fiction novel until it was like my 7th novel. And then the other one that I started writing first, I didn't finish that until it was my 9th novel. And it was a story about 4 brothers, 2 black, 2 white, growing up on a plantation in Georgia in the antebellum South. They fight on opposite sides of the Civil War, and then they move out west and they kind of battle Indians and each other, and they end up back in Georgia, kind of righting ancient wrongs. So that was the brothers Tremaine, and so that was like an epic novel. It's way too long for publishers to be interested in. I think it was like 575 pages. So, but it was, I thought they were each necessary. But at any rate, I don't know. However, during the whole process of research, I had to learn how to write about giving birth, about how to break a horse, a wild stallion, wild mare, all about, saddling horses and all kinds of weaponry of the old times, and all sword play and everything. And I've written a number of books where sword plays an important part of it. And so I've learned a lot of terms about sword fighting, and then I've even studied boxing. So I have a lot of terminology and ideas about that kind of go along with, a lot of the military thrillers. You get all kinds of discussion of handguns and long guns and caliber, etc. And so I try to add whatever I can into what I'm writing, and try to make whatever it is researched and believable. And I figure if I convince myself that I'm halfway there.
It's always that battle, right? Especially in such a solitary practice like writing.
No kidding.
And Stefan, if you want to close us out, just any thoughts from you about, what writing has, if it has triggered any epiphanies or opened up any questions that you still ponder today?
I think, well, one of the common things you're gonna hear is research. Because I can see that the 3 of us have all had to dip our feet in genres and styles, and then like learn more about it in order to make our own stories grander. And you learn, like, as I've read more books to become more versed in the style, and especially with all the combat and war tactics, I have experience in martial arts myself, so it helps me describe the actual combat and techniques that is happening during the fight, instead of saying things like, yeah, they crashed into the melee and then afterwards somebody won. It allows them to go into greater detail and put the audience in the fight and really give them that experience. You also will tend to learn more about yourself as you're writing, because as Roger said earlier, you're pouring yourself into this book. This book is made out of hundreds of thousands of words that have all passed through your subconscious. And when something like this comes from a dream, it's even more powerful because you're pulling the inspiration directly from yourself and how you feel, the way you see the world. And sometimes it affects writers negatively because it'll give you writer's block. It'll be like, do I still feel the same way that I felt when I started this book? Am I still going to feel the same way at the end? Do I want to change something because as I've written it, I kind of feel a little differently about it? There are some scenes that I removed from future books and put into others just because I'm like, maybe now that I'm more mature, this is kind of savage. I'll just put it in someplace else. So yeah, you mature, and it's like therapy almost to a degree, except you're your therapist. You're pouring into your little journal, and a story is going to emerge out of it. That's born from you.
Yeah, I think that idea about the therapeutic aspects of it, I think that would resonate with a lot of people, especially. So yeah, well, thank you all three of you so much for, sharing your thoughts on these questions, but also just for being here with us today and sharing your stories with us. It's always so wonderful, at least in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions, just to hear the words of these, creators, authors, artists, whatever it is, in their own voice. So really, thank you again. And for anyone in the audience, don't forget to order A World Without Men, The Fall of Immortals, and Viola in the Doomsday Affair from the links in the chat. And you can also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. You can feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and make sure to mention that you attended today's event. But until then, we'll look forward to hearing from you, and that's it. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, everyone.
And I wave hi to Cameron back there.
Hey, Tammy. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Can't wait until the next reading.
Yeah, thank
you,
guys.
everyone.